But if you're interested in doing that for us, let us know. My wife is willing to fill in that spot, but only willing on the basis of the fact that we're not getting response from anyone else. She'd really rather retire rather than just rehire. So if you would help us with that, let me know about that. Don't forget the sign-up sheets in the middle foyer for cleaning and for mowing and for whatever else is out there. I forget what other things are out there right now, but keep that in mind. And that we need more help with Children's Church, and we need more help with security. So you can see Cherry Clark if you're interested in helping with Children's Church, and you can see Brian Dahmer if you're interested in helping with security. Keep praying for VBS and for Truth Trackers, and for 36 kids for VBS, and for 20 for Truth Trackers. Plus, we're going to need some help with Truth Trackers. We're going to need some... Truth Trackers is broken up into tiny trackers and then the main group of Truth Trackers. And we're going to need at least one leader, or one leader for the tiny trackers, which is the preschool kids. We're going to need at least one or two leaders for the Truth Trackers group, which is the elementary age kids. We're going to need some people to listen to verses. We're inclined at this point on the 21st of August to start this as an hour and 15-minute period starting at 6 o'clock, but actually about a 15-minute period prior to 6 o'clock when the kids can come in and say verses, and then we start their hour and 15 minutes at 6 o'clock. So we've got 15 minutes at the beginning, 15 minutes at the end that are for verses, and they've got game time and their story time in between there. So folks to listen to verses, we're thinking that we probably need around 6 or 7 people to help us with this process, and we have one or two that have spoken to us so far. So if you're interested in helping us with Truth Trackers, we'd sure like to know that as soon as possible, because if we don't hear from you, we're going to start coming with our arm twisting equipment and start working on you. So, okay. So when I was a kid growing up, and you know, you're a kid growing up, your entire universe revolves around your home, your church, and your school if you're a Christian kid, and your neighborhood, you know, to some degree too. So that was my exposure, and as far as Christianity was concerned, my exposure was my church. That's all I saw. So I didn't know about other churches and what they did. I just knew about our church and what we did. And I knew about our home and what we did. And our church taught us that we shouldn't go to movies. So we didn't. We didn't go to movies. And you know, when you're a kid growing up, then you hear somebody does go to movies, and it's, oh, how in the world could you do such a horrible thing as go to the theater? And, you know, as time went by, then it was like, okay, there's a lot of people who do. And you start realizing that even your parents who said you can't go, back in the 1930s, they all went. On Saturday, everybody got a nickel, and they went to the theater. And they watched some cartoon, or they watched some little ditty. Their parents were careful that they didn't let them see some vaudeville stuff. But other than that, was kind of normal. And then things kind of changed. And so the issue that then comes up is, should Christians attend theater? And when you say theater, you can say that from the perspective of not only movies but live productions. Sometimes the live productions on Broadway are pretty gaudy and pretty bawdy, and you may not want to be there as a believer. Back in the day, it was the only way you could see a Hollywood production was in the theater. People didn't have televisions. You didn't have access to those films on their own, and so there was a time when Christians avoided the theater altogether, even though it was the only way to see stuff like that. And the reason they did that was because of the content and the stigma associated with theater. And let me say that stigma didn't just start in our lifetime or the lifetime of our parents. You can go back into British history, and there was quite a bit of stigma related to going to the theater and seeing something that was produced by, that was written by and produced by a guy named Shakespeare. And there was stigma connected to that for people who were, you know, what's the word that I want? They were a part of genteel society. So that stigma isn't brand new. Well, today you can watch all kinds of media in all kinds of places. You can watch on your phone. You can watch on your television. You can watch on your computer, on your tablet. You don't have to go to a building dedicated to showing films or to showing plays or concerts. You can watch at home or on the plane or in your car. In your car. You know, even when our kids were growing up, the only screens were the ones behind the driver. Now there's a screen right here, and you have a movie going. It's no wonder we have wrecks all over the place. So is the theater still an issue? If so, why? All right, so down to the culture, entertainment, in particular visual entertainment and media, and I was kind of floored by this number. I wrote down $1 billion industry, and I thought I better look it up. It is a $2+ trillion industry worldwide. $2+ trillion. And it's working to capture the attention and the entertainment dollars of the public. And Christians are part of that equation. There are even Christian production companies and Christian films and Christian movie stars, if you want to call them movie stars. It's very much a subculture, so most of the people around the country wouldn't know who these people are, but there is a subculture of Christian media doing the same thing. People still attend the theater and live productions. There's nothing like watching a production in a room-sized screen or on a room-sized screen or on a room-sized stage. But with a heightened caution due to COVID, TV and home video is the largest component. Only, and Claude and I were just talking about this, only 14% of American adults said they had seen a movie in the theater at least once a month, according to a 2022 Statista.com survey. So the stars of those productions are cultural icons, dancing with the who? Stars, you know. America's Got Talent and all that kind of stuff. Their habits, their lifestyles, their views are scrutinized and popularized, and the recent trial involving Johnny Depp and Amber Heard is a good example. They are people that are, folks look at those folks and say, wow, they're really something special. And they want to know every little detail about what's going on in their lives. So that's kind of the culture that we're in today. Let me just pause here for a second and see if you have any things that you would like to contribute to that part of our equation here, as far as the culture is concerned. Yes?
Sometimes it bugs me because they take so much of all our money and they make the big bucks, and we are all at the bottom of that list because the big guys make the big bucks.
Right.
And that's just a lot of that.
Yeah. You can look at government from the same perspective. They tax everybody and spend gobs and gobs and gobs of money, trillions of dollars every year, and say they don't have enough. And that's just the government doing that. The federal government. Then you talk about the state governments and local governments, and they're doing the same thing. And then you can talk about entertainment industry, and then you can talk about sports, which really is a part of the entertainment industry. Pay some guy $100 million over 5 years, or something obscene like that, and all he does is hit a baseball, and he misses the thing 2 out of 3 times. It's amazing that that's the case. And so where do they get all their money? Well, they don't get their money from each other. They get their money from us, right? So there's a lot of us, and we can pay the bills. So you're right. There's pardon me?
Is that the trickle-down theory?
Oh, that's the trickle-up theory. So, Claude, you're going to say something? You got a mic coming here.
So far, you've very much generalized looking or something that you see or see and hear, but you haven't looked at the content. So is there a question about going to theaters or watching TV in itself, or is it the subject matter that's really important, or is it both?
We're going to get to that, but it really, I think, I think the primary issue is the content and the subject matter. And then there is the issue of what impact am I having on other people, depending on what I'm doing. You know, am I again, are my viewing habits known to other people? And if that's the case, what kind of impact is that having on them spiritually?
Well, I used to be baffled that people could sit in front of a computer and watch stuff all day. Now, if I get on YouTube, there's everything in the world. I can spend a lot of time. I don't want my wife to hear this. A lot of time wasted watching good stuff.
Well, that's true. I think selectivity is an important word for us. I want to be selective in the things that I choose to do. And back to what are the right questions? Is this going to benefit me spiritually? Will this bring bondage? Will it defile God's temple? Those are good questions for me to ask with respect to all these various things we've been talking about, and they fit very well here. So let's keep going. I think we're going to get into some of the things you're talking about, because that's an important aspect of this. So what is the issue for believers? Is visual entertainment bad in and of itself? Let me stop there and just ask you, is visual entertainment bad in and of itself? I.e., is entertainment a problem? Depends. I think it depends in part upon what Claude just said. What kind of time amounts am I putting into this? How the content is important. So the idea that I'm going to be entertained is not necessarily a problem. I mean, we are entertained when we listen to a song on the radio. We are entertained if we go to a ball game. We're entertained if we watch something on television. You might even be entertained and informed at the same time. If you ever listen to Rush Limbaugh, he would say that I'm in the entertainment and information business, and he would try to do both. And I think just about anybody who's in that medium on the political side of the equation would say that they're doing the same kind of thing. So entertainment isn't necessarily wrong in and of itself. I would say that the fact that we spend billions in the United States and trillions worldwide just to be entertained does speak volumes about what our priorities are. All right, so the answer to the first question is no, it's not bad in and of itself. There's a lot of things that could be problems with it, but it's not bad in and of itself. So how do we navigate the entertainment choices that are available? What should Christians look for? Okay, Patty?
I try to look
Microphone, because we're broadcasting.
I try to look for wholesome shows, like family shows, or maybe a comedy, you know, if it's a wholesome kind, and you can tell real fast.
It doesn't take much time to figure that out.
I like some reality shows that are informative too.
Okay, all right, so wholesomeness would be something that you're looking for. What else? Doc?
What should people look at?
Okay, so the question about what we should be looking for would be in part, what are we looking at? What are we saying is something that should be coming into my eyes and therefore into my mind? Okay, what else? Think of your questions. Is this going to build me up as a believer or tear me down? Is it wrong necessarily to watch something that you know is factually incorrect, i.e., a documentary on evolution? Would it be wrong to watch that?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, because your reasons for watching it might be different than just I want to soak this all in and believe it all.
You got to be really, really careful when you're letting yourself be influenced by media, especially visual and audio media, because things slip in unawares that way. But let's say that you were just witnessing to someone that had some viewpoints with which you did not agree, and all of a sudden you're surfing the channels or whatever. I don't do it anymore. But if you're surfing the channels and you see something on that particular topic, even though you know it's negative, you might want to educate yourself on what they found so fascinating about it, so that you can combat it with the word of the Lord.
Right.
So that's an example.
Yeah, there could be a reason to see it so that you understand what the other side of the argument is saying. Otherwise, we just are sort of in an echo chamber, where all we hear is our side of the argument. So, Patty?
Well, I noticed since I became more of a steady Christian that when I watch TV or listen to the radio, my conscience will bother me when it's something I shouldn't be seeing or listening to. It'll tell me, turn the channel or whatever like that.
Isn't it great that God gives us that? Our conscience bothering us sometimes, I think the best illustration is it's sort of like the nerves in your body. Your you get too close to something that's hot, and your nerves are saying, no, stop. Don't go there. This is going to really hurt if you do. You step on a nail, your foot's going to tell you right now. Unless there's some diabetic or that kind of issue that may happen. But the idea that you have a conscience that God has reinvigorated when you become a Christian is not a bad thing. It's a great thing that God's given us that.
I'll share with you about, I think it's been about 4 nights ago. I'm thinking about something that perhaps I should not be thinking about at all. And, but I'm thinking about it. And my prayers are to resist temptation, to keep me from the temptation in the first place. Oh God! But if I'm confronted with evil, fight for me. Fight for me. You get in front of me. And I have been seeing in my mind's eye, not in front of me. I don't see things, okay? But in my mind's eye, I have been seeing a cloth material. I think it's white or gray, or I don't know what color it is, but moving in front between me and the bad thing that I'm thinking about. And I know this coming from the Lord. It's letting me know He's fighting the fight for me right there. I can let go of that thought, that temptation, and continue on about my day because He's fighting the fight for me because I asked Him to fight the fight for me.
Right, and that's very much what Patty was just saying. My conscience is telling me, and in your case, you've got this visualized thought of a cloth coming between you and the thing that's bad, but that's your conscience telling you what's going on out in front of me is not something that I should be taking in. And
It's very precious.
yeah, and so it is it's a blessing to have that. So let me ask you this: what trends should we note and should we take into account when we're thinking about entertainment? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think that the Treasury Department is a good example of what they do. They study forgeries and fraudulent money and all that. But first thing they do with their agents is they expose them to real money until they can tell the fake just by touch. And then we should be the same way. We should know God's word and what He teaches about everything before we go to things to study trends. Like in movies, I'll notice that was awfully preachy about homosexuality, and everything is now better because there was an overt acceptance and praise of homosexuality or whatever. And where I say to my daughter, who was at the movie with me, and she says, "Oh, well, it's just a movie about Christian love." I'm like, "But they were Chinese, so it couldn't be Christian love." So you have to be educated and determined to get things out of it instead of just sitting and being amused, where amusement means without thought.
Yeah, so the idea that the world is implanting in us not only thoughts, but is getting us used to the idea of their value system is very much a part of what's going on. Jan and I were just sitting at a restaurant at lunch today, and there was a commercial on that related to Alzheimer's. And it was two men who were probably in their 50s, I would say, maybe 60s, very obviously homosexual, and obviously one of them, I couldn't hear this, it was just on the screen back in the corner of the restaurant, obviously one of them was Alzheimer's, but they were in this committed relationship between these two men, and so we are being told that this is normal. When our kids were growing up, we had Snow White, and we had a whole bunch of Disney movies. And in fact, we still got them. Still have them in VHS form. Don't have anything that will play them, but we got a whole bunch of them in VHS form. And Disney was kind of the go-to thing for families. Well, Disney, with all this stuff that has just happened down in Florida, the quote-unquote don't say gay bill and all that, Disney now has come out and announced that 50% of their characters moving forward will be LGBTQ+. 50%. Half of all characters will be that. So is this something that should bother us? Is that something we should be taking a look at? Keep in mind that when your kids watch this stuff, even when you watch this stuff, but particularly when your kids watch this stuff, that what they're seeing on the screen is normal to them. It normalizes that in their thinking. This is what life is like and what it should be like. And we've got to be real careful what we put in front of them. So, yeah, I think there's some red flags. There's some trends we should note that we should take into account, and that we should be aware of those things. Doc?
It was Martin Luther that said you can't keep the birds from flying through your hair, but you can keep them from making a nest.
Yeah.
In other words, sometimes you're suddenly exposed to something that isn't the way God would like it, but you don't have to keep dwelling on it.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, let's do this. We can come back to some of these other questions here in just a little bit. Let's go to the Word, and let's see what some of the Scriptures have to say. Let's start in Job 31. I know of people who have printed this verse off and stuck it on their computers. Job 31. Yes. I don't know if you heard that, but that's the one Ted Fletchell mentioned. Job says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? For what is the allotment of God from above and the inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Is it not destruction for the wicked and disaster for the workers of iniquity? Does he not see my ways and count all my steps? I have made a covenant with my eyes. So what Job is saying in this passage is, I've made a conscious, purposeful agreement with my eyes that I will not look on a young woman to lust after her. Job, of course, at this point in time, is old enough that he has had 10 children. They've all died. He's still young enough that when this is all over, he's going to have 10 more. So, man, 20 kids. Kind of pity Job's wife. 20 pregnancies and all the kids that went with it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I've made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? So I think that's an important verse for us. It's an important thought for us, coming from a man who is going through tremendous, tremendous suffering. And yet in the midst of all that, this focus. All right, Psalm 139. I'll just start reading here. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain to it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, hell is what it says in the New King James. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. Now, the psalmist is saying in this passage, the psalmist is saying all these things from a positive perspective. Everywhere I go, God's with me. But there's a negative side to that for if you're involved in sin. Everywhere I go, God's with me. I'm not going to hide from him. I'm not going to be able to say, I'm going to go in a corner someplace and watch whatever I want to watch and nobody knows. Yeah, God knows. In fact, the most important person in your life knows. So I think Psalm 139 is a great passage for us when it comes to the concept of I'm never alone. I'm never doing something that doesn't bother anybody else. If no one else on earth ever finds out what I just did, God knows. The one who is my creator, the one who has saved me from my sin, knows. Proverbs chapter 6. Starting with verse 24. Starting in verse 20 is a whole section on adultery. But verse 24 says, to keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering tongue of the seductress, do not lust after her beauty in your heart, nor let her allure you with her eyelids. For by means of a harlot a man is reduced to a crust of bread. An adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be seared? Now, the writer of Proverbs, probably Solomon at this point, is talking about this from the perspective of a person-to-person encounter. But there's stuff here that certainly would relate to the idea of being involved in stuff that would draw me away and ruin my life. Draw me away from God, draw me away from what I know is right, and ruin my life. And that's what he's saying here. And let me say that the people who are producing much of what is available for our consumption are not people who share our values. In fact, their value systems are pretty much diametrically opposed to ours. The people who are acting in these films, the ones that everybody holds up on this high level, it's kind of good for Christians. I don't know if you're spending much time. I'm not spending a lot of time thinking about it. I'm just hearing little snippets from what's going on with this Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, and the snippets are ugly. They're nasty. These people should not be the heroes of Christians. The way that they live their lives is self-centered, it is sensual, it is profane, it is money-grubbing. There's a lot about them to be avoided for us as followers of Christ. So I think it's important for us to see that from this kind of a passage. If you're looking after this person, if that's the person you're looking for, or that's the person you're looking to model your life after, you're in deep trouble. All right, staying in Proverbs, chapter 11. Verse 6. The righteousness of the upright will deliver them, but the unfaithful will be caught by their own lust or their own desires. How are you caught by your own desires?
You yield to temptation.
Okay.
You're in the act. You yield to temptation, you're in the act all of a sudden, and perhaps the timing wasn't right. It was perfect with the Lord, but
Yeah.
the timing wasn't right for you at that particular moment in time, and voila, off to whatever
Right.
punishment.
We're caught by our desires when we feed them. So let's take this from a different perspective. Let's think about it from the perspective of the person who has trouble with alcohol. If you have trouble with alcohol, should you be walking into bars? I mean, that's pretty easy, right? That's pretty dumb. If you really want to stay away from it, pretty dumb to go in where everybody's indulging. And the same kind of thing would be true with respect to entertainment. If you have trouble with areas of, if you are a person who is caught by materialism, and you watch films that just glorify this, it's going to be all the more the case in your own life. I have to have this. I have to have that. I need to have the most expensive car out there. I need to have the most expensive clothing that's out there. I need to look like that person looks. One of the things you got to keep in mind is what that person looks like on the red carpet isn't how they will look in the morning. They look just like you in the morning. It's like
Makeup artists and stuff on them because of the lights and everything.
absolutely, they're a very different person. So, all right. Matthew chapter 5. Let's get into the New Testament. Matthew 5, of course, is the Sermon on the Mount. And in verse 28, Jesus said, verse 27, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Now, Jesus is talking about adultery here, but he goes on to say, if your right hand, furthermore, it's been said, whoever divorces his wife can give her a certificate of divorce. That's not what I was thinking about. If you hate a person, right up before that, verse 21, you heard it said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Whoever says to his brother, 'Raca,' shall be in danger of the council. Whoever says, 'You fool,' shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar," and so forth. And what Jesus is teaching in this passage is, what I think in my heart is every bit as important as what I do with my hands. So if I am thinking adulterous thoughts, then I'm already committing adultery in my heart. If I'm thinking hateful, murderous thoughts, I'm already committing hateful, murderous acts in my heart. So what's going on in my mind, and that's really the focus of this, what's going on in my mind and in my heart is every bit as positive or negative as what's going on when I act it out. In our society, we're supposed to punish things that people do. Now, we've gotten to where we think we know what their motives are, and we charge them with things that related to their motives, which is foolishness. But the idea that we can know another person's motives, that's a problem. But I can know my own motives. And what's going on in my heart, if what's going on in my heart is contrary to what God wants, that's a problem. Now, how does that relate to the entertainment industry? Well, if I'm sitting in front of stuff that is teaching me in my heart to lust after this or that or the other thing, and remember, lust is not just sexual. Lust has to do with your desires. The word means desire piled upon desire. So I've got very strong desire for money, for fame, for clothing, for cars, for whatever it may be. Okay? All right, Romans chapter 13. Are you noticing something about this? How many of these passages specifically have to do with theaters or movies? There was no such thing as a movie theater in Jesus' day. They did have theaters, that is, they had places where actors got up and acted things out. You can find that out in ancient Greece. Very little of that kind of thing took place in ancient Israel, either pre-Christ or during Christ's time, but it was part of the culture. The Romans were involved with that, even more the Greeks were involved with that. But the idea of something that was technologically advanced like what we have today, where you can have an entire theater in your pocket. That just didn't happen. And so you're not going to find stuff in the Bible that says do or don't go to the theater and watch movies. It's not there. What you have to find is what am I supposed to be doing with my heart, with my mind, and what difference does this make? Okay? All right, Romans 13, verse 14. But put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts. Actually, if you look at that, if you're looking at the New King James, if you look at that, the word fulfill is in italics. So what it really says is, make no provision for the flesh to lust. Make no provision for the flesh to feed your desires, to feed your powerful negative desires. Remember that the word lust can be both positive and negative in Scripture. Most of the time when it's translated lust, it's translated that way from the perspective of the negative based upon the context, and that's what this would be here. Okay, so make no provision for the flesh. Galatians 5, 16 to 21. I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now, the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hate. Remember, the word lust applies to all of these. Hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like. So he has a list here of about 15 different things, and he says, that's not all. There's more. Of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, Paul's making a pretty strong statement to the Galatians. The Galatians are thinking in terms that they have to go back to being Jews in how they practiced life, how they lived their lives, in order to be saved. So the whole point of Galatians is you shouldn't be living according to the Jewish law and thinking that that's what's going to save you. You're saved by grace through faith, not by keeping the law. So legalism, that's what legalism is, thinking you're going to be saved by keeping the law. Legalism will not save you. That said, here's Paul saying, here's the works of the flesh. All these things, if you practice, if this is how you live your life, these things are eternal life robbing. They're going to steal away from you your ability to live for God. There are a host of others here. Our time is kind of getting away from us, but I do want to touch on a couple of others. If you'll allow me to take a look here for just a second. You know what? The next one is 1 Thessalonians 4. Let's look at that. Verse 3. For this is the will of God, your sanctification. What is sanctification? To be set apart. Holiness. The concept of sanctification is the concept of becoming holy, becoming set apart to God. So this is the will of God, that you become holy. All right? That you should abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor, not in passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. So our goal in life should be to be more and more and more like Christ, more and more like our Father, and walk in those steps rather than in a situation that becomes more and more like the world. I've said this on a couple of other occasions when we were talking about some of these other what's wrong with things, and that is that when I was a teenager growing up, they would always ask us the question, are you wanting to walk in your Christian life closer to the Lord, or are you wanting to walk in your Christian life closer to the world? Are you trying to walk as close to the world as you possibly can without actually stepping into and becoming all that the world is? Where are you living your life, essentially was the question. Are you living your life over here next to the world, trying to be like them? You come to church on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday, you're just like your friends at school and your friends in the neighborhood, and you're doing all the same things. And you know, if they're cussing, you're cussing. If they're drinking, you're drinking. If they're smoking weed, you're smoking weed. If they're having illicit relationships, you're having illicit, but you don't want anybody else to know that at church, right? 1 Thessalonians 4:3-5 says, don't walk over here, walk here. Try to be as much like Christ as you can in your life. 2 Timothy 2:22. I'll just read, keep going here. Flee also youthful lusts, but instead pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. The last part of that says something to me. My parents used, when I was a kid, used to say, your friends will dictate a lot of what you do. And I used to think to myself, well, that's not true. I dictate what I'm going to do. But if I build a core of friends around me who are ungodly people, I'm going to do the ungodly thing. Every year when I was a youth pastor, we took kids to camp. And when we took kids to camp, the kid who was the problem child in your youth group found the other problem children at camp within the first 2 hours of camp. He found them because they were birds of a feather. And they wanted to do things that would get them in trouble and make life miserable for them because that was fun for them. They thought that was a great time. So they found each other. Well, let me say, your friends speak a lot about who you are. The people that you hang with speak a lot about who you are. And if what you've done is build into your life ungodly people, that's going to have an impact on you, whether you think so or not. Now, that's not to say that you should only have acquaintances and friends who are believers. If that's the case, you'll never witness to anybody. I've got a group of friends who I've played hockey with. I haven't done much hockey playing recently, but I've got a group of friends I've played hockey with. 2 or 3 of them know the Lord. Most of them do not. Most of them are just pagans. They just really are. And to be around them in a situation where that's the only people that I'm around would lead me in a direction that I should not go. So they like to drink, they like to swear, they like to talk about girls. I mean, these are all guys in their 60s and 70s, right? They like to talk about girls in terms that are not positive. So that's who these guys are. So I don't spend a lot of time around them, but I want them to hear the gospel. So I'll have lunch with them once in a while on Mondays. Haven't done that for a little while either. I need to do it again. I'll have lunch with them once in a while. When I was playing hockey, I was with them at least on a weekly basis because we played hockey together. That was opportunity for me to share Christ. So you don't want to just get yourself, Paul said you can't go out of the world, you're in the world, but you shouldn't allow the world to be in you. And that's where this friendship thing shows up. And I think that's what Paul's saying to Timothy here in 2 Timothy 2:22. Titus chapter 2. I changed my mind and just kept right on going here. Titus chapter 2, verse 11. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live seriously, that's what the word soberly means, seriously, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. There are another 4 passages. I'm gonna pause here. I want to just mention my position and then open this up for any other thoughts that you may have. Jan and I used to never attend a movie theater. And while we've softened that position a bit in the last 10 years or so, we still attend very selectively and infrequently. It's probably been a year, 15 months, something like that, since we were in a theater. The last one we watched was a Christian movie. I would like to see 2,000 Mules. Haven't seen that. Most of what is offered is unfit for Christian consumption. We also don't have cable TV in our home, though the reasons for that also involve cost. So let's be honest here. That's not the only. Being careful to not bring that in is not the only reason. I would love to have cable TV from the perspective of being able to watch hockey and watch some other things, but there's also so much on cable TV that's bad. Now, let me say, there's a lot of stuff on broadcast television that's horrific too. So you have to be careful about that. We've placed Covenant Eyes browsing protection on our devices, and Covenant Eyes isn't the only one. There are a number of others that will do this for you. And we've done that both at home here and in my office here at church. We believe that what we put in front of our eyes through the media and entertainment venues enters our minds and either defiles our minds or sanctifies our minds. The content of what we allow, Doc, this is what you were saying earlier, the content of what we allow determines whether our minds are sanctified or defiled. And so that's our position. It's not, we have not said that. We used to say attending the theater is a problem. In fact, I remember, can I confess here? I remember as a in-between semesters student in seminary going to see Star Wars in the theater. I had already matriculated for the next semester, so what I did was wrong because it said in my matriculation, this is seminary, folks, I was out of college. I'd already matriculated, and it said, I will not go to the theater. So during the summer, I went and watched this. I'm telling you, my conscience beat me up royal for doing that, and rightly so, because what I did was wrong. Now, I mean, Star Wars has some themes in it that are weird and certainly not Christian, but it was not, I mean, there wasn't a lot of skin or any of that kind of thing going on. So it's not like I was defiled in some really horrible ways by watching Star Wars, but I was defiled because what I did was wrong. I said I wouldn't go. Now again, we've modified our position over the years, and we're not totally against the idea of stepping into a theater, but there are some questions back here that I think you should answer before you do this kind of thing. Is it going to benefit me spiritually? Will it violate my conscience? Will it draw others to Christ or push them away? So if somebody knows that I'm going to the theater, they find out for some reason that I'm going to a theater, it slips out or whatever, and they find out which movie that I went to see, is that going to encourage or discourage them spiritually? Frankly, I think that's one of the stronger elements for wanting to be very careful and selective and infrequent in your time spent in theaters or even at concerts and so forth. All right. We've got about 10 minutes. Comments or questions? Yes. Donald, behind you.
So I happen to be a big fan of movies and different TV shows, and that's definitely a much larger part of my generation. But just a few thoughts on that. Obviously, in the same way we keep friends, we need to be careful of our media choices. Because, at least in my generation, people start to associate with characters in TV shows. They see themselves as being a part of it. And some of these TV shows are horrendous. I think of in the last 3 or 4 months, there was a TV show that swept the nation called Euphoria, which was absolutely, from everything I've heard, I'm glad I didn't watch it. It was utter garbage from our perspective. They were talking about drugs and sex, and this was all depicted as high schooler students. So obviously on that front, we have to be very careful at what things we support. In fact, my family has recently decided we're not doing Disney Plus anymore. They have decided they're putting their money where we don't like it, so we're not giving them our money. But on that note, one of the good things about the internet and the proliferation of all this media is you can often go on the internet from multiple different sources and get reviews on the material that you're thinking about consuming, and getting information on what's in it. Even if you just go to IMDb, which is the database for all movies and whatnot, you can find out, okay, what is the profanity in this? What is the nudity and sexual content? All of that's plainly listed by instance throughout the entire film, so you know what you're getting into before you get into the theater or before you start watching the movie.
Doc?
Focus on the Family has an area where they rate lots and lots and lots of movies, you know, how good they are, how bad they are. And I just looked up 2,000 Mules. I can see it at least 4 different times just on my phone right now.
You can watch the movie right now on your phone, yeah. You have to pay for it. It's free on your phone. Interesting.
You can buy a DVD version for $20.
Yeah.
You're a similar generation to my father, and his generation was, we don't go to theaters, but we'll buy the movie and watch it at home. What's the difference? If it's crappy enough, excuse my language, if it's dirty enough that you don't want to watch it at the theater, why in the world would you bring it into your home and watch it in your home?
Well, I remember the argument, and the argument is the one that I just made just a moment ago. I don't want to be an offense to someone else by watching at the theater, so I won't go to the theater. I made that argument. For years I made that argument. And I think in your dad's and my generation, that argument carried a little bit more validity than it does today. Today, all kinds of people go and nobody thinks twice about it. So it's not so much that you're going to have that kind of an issue. Now, let me say this: if it was a garbagey movie, and the only thing that you're saying is I don't want to be seen going in and seeing a garbagey movie, but I'd like to watch it at home, now we got problems, because we're back to Doc's thought about content. Content makes a difference. I shouldn't be watching something, if it's going to defile my conscience, I shouldn't be watching it at home or on my phone or on an airplane where nobody knows me, or wherever I might be watching it, where I think I can get away with it. I mean, we've lost a major component of walking with Christ if my thought process is I can get away with it here and nobody knows me, or nobody sees me. So if the content of the movie was bad in the theater, you shouldn't be watching it at home. And I think that's one of the things that one of the arguments that was made against this whole idea, I shouldn't go to the theater. Well, okay, if you're going to watch junk at the theater or at home, but you wouldn't go to the theater to watch it, you're a hypocrite. Fair enough. God's still going to see it no matter where you watch it, right? Jan?
I was going to say that same thing, but you covered it. The other thing we tried to do when our kids were growing up, they had a choice. I mean, we would give them the choice, and they could maybe watch one thing a day. Sometimes it would, depending on their schooling and where they were, we made it so that they couldn't watch any TV during the week. And then, or if there was one show during the week that we felt was okay, we'd let them have that. But everything else came first. And I think, especially now with phones and everything else, most of the time we don't even know what our kids are watching. And I think that's so important that we're cautious with that. Back when phones were starting, we didn't allow our kids to have a phone till they were in high school. And now some of the little kids I have in school in second grade or whatever bring a phone with them. But not only what they watch, but what's being brought in, that they'll turn on something and something else comes on, and they're filling their minds with that. So just another area to be cautious of.
It is one of the things that you have to be careful of. All kinds of advertisements pop up, and sometimes the stuff that pops up on your phone or on your computer is not something that you want to view, or that you would want someone else viewing. A lot of that stuff isn't going to pop up unless you have somehow indicated that you want that, but in some cases it has nothing to do with that. So yes, Donald?
Quick note on advertising and pop-ups. For the most part, how they do that is it's by IP address, not necessarily what device you're logged into. So if you're a parent and you're looking at inappropriate things, it quite possibly could pop up an ad for your child because it's based on your house's IP address, not your specific device. Just thought I'd share that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's important. All right, so we're close to the end here. So what would be bottom line here? Is the building the real issue? I mean, it can be if in some way it's an offense to somebody, but it's not really the issue with respect to what's going in and out of your mind. You can do that in the building, but it's even more likely that you can do it at home or do it in some venue where nobody else knows, or using some venue that you're all by yourself. So the real issue here with respect to entertainment is, how am I allowing myself to be entertained? And how much time, I would say this too, how much time am I pouring into entertainment? We really didn't get into this part of it, but, and I don't know the exact statistics, but it is hours a day that the average teenage kid spends on a device. Hours every day. We're not talking about 1 or 1.5. We're talking about 4 or 5 hours every day on this device, watching things. Even if all of it is wholesome, how much better use of my time could I be making than just being, what did you say amusement is?
Without thought.
Without thought, which describes what's going on with us most of the time when we're watching something on a screen in front of us. I'm on a veg in front. I'm gonna binge watch. Yeah, Mark?
And one thing about the big screen is that it's immersive. It's your eye when you're thinking about things. When you're driving down the street and you need to see the signs better, you turn down the radio because you've got. But with the big screen, the eye is full, the ears are full. It's very immersive. Where at home, it might be as big, but just because it's closer. But you can pause it. You can talk about things. You can reflect on it. Where when it's in the theater, you can't stop it. It's just happening. The good guy makes a bad decision, but it all works out because writers. But
Yeah.
anyway.
You know, Donald, you said something earlier too that I think is an important aspect of this. In the generations that we're watching right now, Gen X and Gen Z is the next one. There is a lot of fantasy. These kids are not living in the real world. They're living in a fantasy world. And a lot of that has to do with the entertainment options that they have in front of them. So much of what is out there is pure fantasy. It's not real. But that's where they live. They think that way. They identify that way. They are fantasy fanatics. And they've become part of that world. Donald made that statement earlier. Become part of that world. And the result of that is the real world, the world that we live in, the world that is life and death, that is God versus Satan, that world is not even real to them anymore because they're living in this fantasy world. Sam, you going to say something?
Yes, coming to the time issue, I would say to add another piece would be priority. What are your priority? You know, if you have a great game going on or an entertainment, and we also have a church activities, or you need to be in church. Between those two,
Yeah.
what are you taking? Will you say, well, I'm going to go to this game, or I'll be in church? I don't think, having choosing between those two priorities at a time, I think it set you apart. Then, you know, I will only go to church when the time, you know, when the time is, you know, right. That's the time I will go to church. Versus saying, well, this one is more important. I'm supposed to be here than here.
And that's a problem that has been going on for generations. I remember when my dad was first getting into ministry, this will tell you how old I am and how old my dad was, that the Sunday night program was the Ed Sullivan Show. And my dad would just rail against the Ed Sullivan Show because so many Christians stayed home to watch the Ed Sullivan Show instead of coming to church on Sunday night. So instead of being around God's people, they allowed themselves to be, you know, entertained by Ed Sullivan and all the different acts and people that he brought on his show. And a lot of that same kind of thing happens now. During Broncos season, there's some people who simply will not go to church. Why?
When I was a kid in the 70s, it was Disney's Sunday night movie.
Yeah, yep. Satan's not stupid. He puts things on that are going to pull us away from the Lord. I think, Samuel, if I can say this, I think your comment about priorities is really important in this discussion. When our kids were growing up, they took piano, so they had piano practice time every day. They hated it, but they did it. Not all of them hated it. They didn't have it every day, but most of them hated it most of the time. Practice time. They had homework, and they had to do that before any of this other stuff could come on. They had church activities that they had to be involved with. They played on sports teams, and they had practices and games, which also created its own issues, but that taught them some things about teamwork and taught them some things about discipline, and we felt like those were important things. And so there were a lot of different things that were going on in their lives, and a lot of that revolved around church. I'm going to brag on my second son for just a second. Jonathan was valedictorian of his class. He had a shot at the Daniel Scholarship, which if you're familiar with the Daniel Scholarship in Colorado, the Daniel Scholarship will allow you to go to a Colorado, remind me if I'm wrong in how I'm saying this, Tina, but I think it allows you to go to the Colorado public school of your choice for free, full ride scholarship. He had a shot at that scholarship. And he went in for the interview, and everything was good with the interview except for this. They said to him at the end, we would have liked to have seen you talk about more of your philanthropic involvement outside of your church. All you've talked about is your church. And I remember thinking to myself afterwards, well, number one, there was a lot of other things he could have said had he wanted to. But number two, it's interesting that they're so antagonistic toward philanthropic things that you're doing through your church, because he did a lot of stuff through the church. A lot of things that he ministered to people while he was here in our church. So Daniels didn't like it, and he didn't get the scholarship. But when he came out of there, I was secretly kind of proud of him, because his focus was on, here's how I'm serving God and my fellow man. I'm serving them through my local church. So that was a priority. Claude?
A reference you had, I think, in your notes last week, but I don't see it this time, but Psalm 101:3, the first part says, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. And then the last part says, it shall not fasten its grip on me. And we did mention 1 Corinthians 6:12, all things are lawful, but I will not be enslaved by anything. Addiction is another word we haven't used tonight that, at least I don't think we have, that comes in as a power play on this whole thing. As you get into these routines, these ruts, out of habit, and then eventually addiction, you're compelled to do these things. So that's another thing to be careful of, because it will suck you in.
We think of addiction as a physical thing. I'm addicted to cigarettes, I'm addicted to alcohol, I'm addicted to drugs or whatever. But addiction is every bit as much mental. In fact, what authorities on this will tell you is that your physical addiction is over long before your mental addiction is over. And you can be out of the physical addiction within a couple of 3 days in something like smoking. But your mental addiction goes on sometimes for weeks before you're clear of that mental addiction. So Your point is well taken. We will sometimes get into stuff like this. We're creatures of habit. We'll sometimes get into this stuff and become entrapped in it, and the next thing you know, I cannot live without this stuff. So, Covenant Eyes, the thing that I mentioned here before, not only do they have this monitoring system, but they also send you emails on a regular basis. And it's interesting how often those emails have to do with the concept of addiction, sexual addiction. So, all right, somebody else had a hand up? All right, let's stand. We'll be dismissed with a word of prayer. And as we have been doing through this, if you want to continue the chat, I'll stay here. My wife may eventually leave me, but I'll stay here for a little while. And we can have a little bit more chat if you'd like. Otherwise, you're dismissed. It's good to have you here tonight. I hope these things are, next week what we're going to do, I'm going to wrap this up next week. My intention at the beginning was to just do 1 week on alcohol, and it ended up being 2. And then we would kind of go through and just do these and then not have a wrap-up. I'm going to do a wrap-up next week. And we'll talk about what's wrong with and what's right with. And let's think about this from the perspective of how we as Christians should view these challenges. And we only touched on 5. How we could view these various challenges that we go through and that we deal with in our lives, and how we can be walking with Christ as we go through those things. So, Father, thank you for your word. We didn't get to all the verses, and even the ones that we had listed, Claude brought one up here just a second ago that was dynamite in this whole discussion. And I just pray that you'll give us wisdom as we think about what we put in front of our eyes. The world says we should be looking at anything and everything. And to say that there's something we shouldn't be looking at is censorship. And we say we should self-censor. We should be looking at things that honor the Lord Jesus Christ, that build us up as Christians, that promote the cause of Christ in front of others, so that people see us not only do you see us in every instance, but the people who do see us in the public setting will see us honoring Christ in our lives. Those are important thoughts in this whole area of entertainment. And the priority issue is an important thought, and the content issue is important. They're just some really important things for us to consider. So I pray that you'll help us as we think about these, that we will set no wicked thing in front of our eyes, and that we'll be godly people as we think about the choices that we have in entertainment. We pray these things in Jesus' name.